Defensively, why is Ryan Royer going to be your best player?
Well, because he'll be up for the Heisman, and if they haven't really worked the NIL stuff out with him and getting a Heisman push from our whole student body, I'm trying to help him out. Maybe last year wasn't a great thing because they didn't get to actually see him as much in person, but when they do, I would say by midway through the season, he'll be up for
sure.
Student Heisman of the Year, and hope I can be a part of his campaign.
Those guys have to be so much fun to coach because that kid just loves it. Like he loves every second of it.
He is. I mean, and that's what I think over the years is what you really want to develop.
He'll talk about that spring game for the rest of his life.
Oh, don't worry, he's still talking about it, but he does so much more probably off the field to talk as well. But you have to have that, and a big part of this year is going to be what roles can we excel, accepting and taking, and that's the unique thing about a guy like Royer, that he does kind of figure out what his role is going to be. He doesn't just say, okay, I'm fine with that, and then just kind of coast through. He continues to enhance his role in the best way possible, and if that means creating so much excitement on the team, he's going to thrive at it.
Defensive line, you have to just kind of look at that group at some points and laugh. You could play a 5-man front and have depth. Like it's unbelievable the way that the talent has developed and kind of come together. When a couple years ago we were talking, how are you going to replace Cortez and Cope? How is this all going to work? And now you got guys that should play that probably aren't going to get to see much time.
And that's going to be one of those big deals is when you're playing with 3 guys on the field. Maybe you play with more 4 guys on the field, and the way those things all come together and how they mesh and gel is going to be a big deal, and how good this team can be or how great this team can be. That's a position in particular that's got incredible talent, and by nature they all want to play, and I love that. But how are they able to work together, thrive in the role that they have, whether that's 50-50 roles, whether that's 60-40 roles, or maybe sometimes in a Majay case, it's 80-20 because it's hard to keep one guy like that off the field. But finding a way in what that is going to be a big deal, and where you could say, oh, you don't have to find out a lot of things about your D-line in camp. Yeah, you do. You got to find out a lot about how those guys are going to be able to work together, what kind of roles. If you can play 50-50 with 2 guys at one position, that's awesome because now they can go,
full
100% all the time, and that's what the expectation can be. And even with that, if you had 6 guys, you still got, probably 4 others that deserve a lot of opportunities as well. So there's going to be a lot of competition there, but hopefully we'll find a way, and Coach Scruggs can do a great job of making sure those guys all gel and knowing what the expectations are for the whole group.
High expectations for Juwan Breaks transferring him from Virginia. How has he fit into the culture? Really bright kid, as we know. Yeah. How has he adjusted to being one of the guys here?
I think really well. I mean, we say that all those things through the winter and spring are about toughness and work ethic and working together and meeting your teammates and trust, respect, and love. The one thing that gets thrown into the mix always in fall camp and into the season becomes the human element. And it's going to be, one of those more difficult things because, it could be a 50-50. He could be playing 60-40. He could be playing 70-30. I don't know. But how all that meshes together, he's got an incredible ability. I think for what we do and how we ask that position to play, as he learns it more and more, he can be an even more dynamic player than he has been in his first 2 years of college. So I think a lot of those things are still to come. Hopefully he's still got a couple years so he can develop into a lot of those things, and maybe even you start to transform as you move forward with guys like that, and maybe what you do.
You mentioned position. Is he a 3-tech? Is he a 5-tech? Where do you see him going into camp?
Well, for us to start with, in our 3-man stuff, he's a 5-tech.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's a whole lot of difference between a 5 and a 3 in what we do, but he also could be a really good nose. Obviously, that's where he started for 2 years at Virginia.
Yeah.
But I think that's where he would like to be. That's where I think he can be most dominant in what we do. But his versatility, can give us a lot of options.
When you first saw Eric Phillips after spring football, did you know who he was? Because I looked at him in the locker room. Eric Phillips, for the young man from Coleraine, he lost, 40, 50 pounds?
Small child.
He's lost my daughter, basically, between
Yeah, so I mean, he was anywhere from 320, then it went down to like 250.
Yeah.
You know,
He looked like I didn't recognize him at squat vest. I had to double take.
So, you know, and he's kind of transforming, trying to figure out what that position exactly is, too. When we brought him in, we thought he was a nose guard.
Yeah.
You know, and now he's more of a true 5'3" guy that can play a little bit more on the edge. And, you know, that's where you want these younger guys to not get frustrated if, you know, maybe you're playing behind a Maje or a Briggs or a Van that, you know, just 2-3 years older than you, that there's great light at the end of the tunnel, and you're going to be much better, you know, competing with those guys, working your butt off. That whatever your opportunities are this year, you know, they're going to grow and grow and grow as long as you keep doing what you've done.
Speaking of grow, what lab did you grow or find Rob Jackson?
That's one of those COVIDs. Not saying surprise, like we didn't know, but
you didn't get to see him. You never met him.
That's what I mean. Coach Hitch did a phenomenal job, and you know.
Did he show up and did you go, who is this?
I'm like, 83-inch wingspan, 6'4.5", 285. Like, okay, I wasn't sure. You know, sometimes you watch those Zoom calls, and you're not exactly sure. Is he 5'11"?
Do you have him do this on the Zoom call?
We don't. You know, he can be really close. It's kind of like you and your pictures with your fish, right? We just stick it really out and forward. That looks huge. So I'm sure there's many different ways on some of them Zoom calls to try to figure out what exactly it is you're looking at. But he's going to be another one of those young guys that, you know, there's a lot of people that are trying to grab him and take him into their positions.
Him and Z, both guys to watch as we go through. Linebacker, do your linebackers feel disrespected? Because nobody talks about your linebackers, and you got a pretty dang good linebacker group. You got Pony Boy, you got Beavers, you got DeBlanco.
Well, we don't refer to him as
that's right.
Boy.
He's Stallion. He's the Stallion.
No, I don't do that. I'm not going to go that far. Give him another year. He's Ty.
Okay.
He's Ty Van Fossen. Some might call him a Stallion, but I'm going to give him another year before I kind of nickname him that far.
But you got some depth behind those guys. Like, you're pretty good at linebacker, and they don't get talked about a lot.
I think there's as much depth at linebacker, you know, sometimes as there is at the D line.
Just three amigos.
Just don't know it as much. So those guys and finding ways to get on the field and find a role is going to be a big deal, you know. But Joel coming back obviously is really big with the leadership and, you know, the experience that he's had, and obviously Beavers is one of those guys. I think we all know who he is, but I don't know if anybody nationally really knows who he is, and I think he could be one of those guys that has that year that everybody nationally really starts to recognize who he is.
Am I crazy to think that over the past 3 or 4 games, he was as good as anybody else that was on your defense last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were times when, you know, he was definitely a difference maker for us. And I think from where he was even at the end of last year to where he is now is a far cry. And I mean, just his dedication to the weight room and a lot of the things and his body and a little bit of a transformation. I think he's kind of set up. There's some guys there that we know, you know, the Josh Wileys, the Darren Beavers, that, you know, the Bearcat Journal people know, but I'm not sure everybody throughout the country knows. And I think that it could be one of those opportunities for these guys to break out.
Right behind them, a lot of local guys.
Yeah.
Brody Engel, Jaheim Thomas, David Jones, Deshaun Pace.
Yep.
How close are those guys ready to break through?
It's just an opportunity, and you'll see them. You will see them in some roles. You know, we don't roll as much at the linebacker position as we do at D-line, but there's going to be probably a lot more role at that dollar spot with Pace and Ty and, you know, Joel, and trying to figure out with Brody and David kind of playing in there with the mic, and then Jaheim, you know, working in there with Beavers. But, you know, then you also got to throw into the mix Huber, who, you know, who probably was the one guy that got hurt last year just on the situation more than anybody. He missed most of camp because of quarantine for COVID.
You take a linebacker off the field.
So, yeah, and then he comes back, and then second or third game of the year, because he had moved from offense to defense, he gets a high ankle sprain that lingers for about 6 weeks, so he misses another 6 weeks of practice. And, you know, where his ability to switch positions and sides of the ball, it takes work, and he just didn't get some of those opportunities. So there's going to be some different roles maybe that he even fills into, but there's a lot of depth there.
When Jack Dingle walked onto campus, did you go, oh, that's what I looked like in high school?
Well, I thought
reminds me of me.
maybe what you looked like when you were in college.
I was shorter,
just the shorter version of it. But there's another one of those guys that walk in there and you're like, okay, we've got some opportunities here, but hopefully, a lot of those young kids they're going to find what that role is going to be. And 3 years ago, you would have probably penciled him in to say,
started.
Hey, he's either going to start or he's going to be a guy that's going to work to earn a spot. Where now we're just in a little different place. And Leroy and Junior too. I mean, those guys are football players that are going to have to find some roles this year. But hope they all understand that the best case scenario is that they have an opportunity to learn from some really good players, compete, and figure out whatever that's going to be. It's a positive as long as you're working.
True or false? Watching the third team might be more fun than watching the first and second team this camp.
It could be.
It's usually
it could be more of a challenge. I mean, it could be more competitive than I think we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And we've had those conversations. That's the way practices may be built a little bit more.
Safe secondary, started safety, and the fact that you lost James Wiggins and Derek Forrest, and nobody's really blinking because of Brian Cook and Javon Hicks. In a place like this, if you lose two guys that are drafted, generally it's a nightmare situation.
We're worried, and we're very, very, very fortunate. Probably look back at ourselves and say, darn it, we didn't do a good enough job of getting these guys some opportunities, more opportunities last year.
I think Brian Cook's your breakout player on the roster.
Again, I sometimes take it for granted that I know him and you know him.
Yeah.
But he would be the other third guy that I would say maybe nobody nationally knows him, but they will. And I think he's got that kind of ability, and he's aggressive. And we're going to put him in a lot of situations where he has an opportunity to really play and make some things happen. So, and then Javon obviously started 12 games the year before.
He's all conference.
I think he might have led the league in interceptions.
Yeah.
So the thing there is now we're going to be in competition for some depth there, and the Jacob Dingles of the world and the Will Allens of the world,
Will Adams
of the world are going to be guys that are going to be thrust in a lot of situations, see what they can do, and then the young kids, the freshmen are going to have a real chance there to find out what they can do as well.
Armorian Smith, Brian Threats, and Isaiah Cox is a guy.
Those are three guys that are going to get a lot of reps. And that when we're talking about the competitive nature in that three group, those guys got a bright future from what we've seen so far. I mean, we've had a couple of those guys, Marion and Brian, we had in spring. So those guys were guys that came in early. You've seen it develop in them just as a football player, but even physically. So to throw those guys in the mix, boy, there's going to be a lot of competition right there. And with great leadership. That's the thing that's so unique about that spot. You lost two guys who were drafted, and you might have every bit as good a leadership with Brian Cook and Javon Hicks, which bodes well for the young guys.
What would you have said 3 years ago? I would have told you 3 years from now, the kid that wants to be known as Sauce is going to be Pro Football Focus's number 4 overall defender in the country.
I would not have believed you. I don't know that I even believed Coach Mick when they were hyping him up a little bit. But had he not come down to our club, I'm sure we still would have probably recruited him. But I'll be honest with you, I'm the one that said, hey, he comes here, after 2 years in the weight room. I think he'll eventually be able to get on the field and get stronger because he was 160 pounds.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And then all of a sudden we had to put him in the UCF game, and then by the end of the UCF game, we had to leave him on the field.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying he's come a long way, but we've come a long way recognizing what he can do.
He looks like a different person right now. I mean, he's physically, he's not the skinny kid that was all arms and legs and looked like a baby deer 3 years ago.
From 160 to 200 at that position, it's not. You see linemen gain 40 pounds. You see, some other guys gain 40. You don't normally see a corner gain 40 pounds.
Me, you.
Yeah. So no, he is he's even a better football player than he just is, a physical specimen. So he's set himself up to have a great year too.
And on the other side, is there anybody you've loved coaching more than Kobe Bryant? Love Kobe Bryant.
No, I mean, there's nobody. I mean, we always kind of said that Derek, I think in our 4 years here, was kind of the epitome of what the culture is. Well, Kobe Bryant is the epitome of what our culture has developed into and what it wants to be. And 4 years ago, 5 years ago here, and you say, okay, what's the picture of what your culture is? And when Derek was leaving last year, I'd say, well, he's what we wanted our culture to be. And, you know, Kobe is the same exact. He is what I always envisioned the culture being, and he's done an unbelievable job. And, you know, as we go into the season, I'll probably tell the team when we start off this, you know, coming up here real soon, that Kobe and Des are just our starting or our captains already. I mean, they're guys that are going to be returning guys.
You voted, I voted, those are the two.
We don't need to vote them in. We'll eventually vote for the other captains as we move forward. But those guys, Kobe in particular, has just set the tone for what the expectations of a culture is.
And then not enough people talk about Arquan, who could be an outstanding outside corner.
Yeah.
But because you've got Sauce and Kobe, he is adjusted to being the slot guy.
And he was the guy that had to fill in 45 minutes before the game when we moved him to the boundary corner. And I think it was really a learning experience for him to realize there's, you know, where he's really good in the slot. If he, you know, to take some of those next steps, he realizes what he's got to do. And he's had a great offseason, and he's a guy that is very versatile for us. Dinged up a little bit, over the last couple of years, but is going to do nothing but continue to grow.
And then it's another group that's going to be amazing to watch at camp battle for who's the 1As, the 1B, or the 1Bs and the 2s. And we were joking in the spring, you had a 4-star in Sammy Anderson that ran a lot with the 3s.
Yeah.
Not because he was disappointing.
No.
But because there's just so Jaquan, and I think Bumpus has really been.
He has done a great job.
And Sammy, and now you bring these young guys in to go along with them, and Justin Harris.
Yeah, those guys have all grown. And that's the thing about Sammy coming in is he's transformed from a basketball player into a football player. And I don't mean, what do you mean? Like, you know, his arms, his shoulders, he's, you know, that physically, he was always a really gifted, athletic kid laterally, you know, but probably wasn't as gifted just straight speed, and what he's done over, you know, a year and a half of physically building his body is going to give him a lot of opportunities. You know, if it wasn't for Kobe and, you know, Ahmad, you know, those guys would be thrusted into compete to truly be a starter. So there's going to be a lot of competition and kind of moving guys around to find out where the next spots are with all of them. So they'll all get a lot of opportunities.
And Malik Rainey, I forgot, we mentioned him earlier. Let's get him in the right spot.
They'll all get a lot of opportunities based on, you know, the speed and the things that we've got over there at the wide receiver position as well.
Special teams, how has the rake progressed?
Well, he has put on a good
Mason
20,
Fletcher,
30,
by the way.
35 pounds or so.
Is he standing up straight? Brady said
his shoulders are starting. His shoulders are starting to be able to come back as we've developed a couple back muscles to pull those shoulders up. You know, he's got an advantage over where Jimmy was as a freshman because he was here in the spring, and so hope that means a lot. Now, you know, normally you aren't talking about battles and putting pressure on kickers in camp, but we got to find a way to put a lot of pressure on those backup quarterbacks. We got to find a way to put a lot of pressure on our punter just to see what it is that we've got.
And then the kicking game, obviously, you got to feel good with Cole.
Cole, you know, obviously done a really good job. He's, you know, matured. We just had a meeting. Coach Brady said he's had by far his best offseason. Just physically stronger, bigger. I think he's in a really good place. So it's going to be exciting to watch. You
ready to get out there? Ready to get back at it? Campfire ground for 3 weeks?
Believe me, 2.5. I wish it was 3, but school starts a little bit early this year, so we gotta bring him back a little early.
Why aren't we out there today? Let's go.
Believe me, if the rules weren't, I don't know why we didn't start on a Thursday night game so that we could have got to camp a little bit earlier, but it's okay. We'll go with what we got.
All right. See you, Coach. Thanks. Appreciate it.